is that Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark got a contract extension today. Jake, very simple, straightforward question. Greg Sankey or Brett Yormark?
Well, you got to take Greg Sankey all day. I mean, I think it's, there's no question that the SEC is in a better position than the Big 12 is in. But I don't think that that's any shade against Brett Yormark. I think Brett Yormark was brought in for a very specific purpose, and that was to shepherd the conference forward, to leverage his relationships that he had from the entertainment world, and help this conference grow. And I think he's done that. I think he handled realignment really well, and I think the conference is in a really good spot. Obviously, yes, things to work on, as there always is, but I really do feel that it is, it's unfair to Brett Yormark to say, hey, like, is this dude like the best commissioner in college football? I mean, I think it all depends. Best is defined by what you have to work with. I mean, if you compare him to, Greg Sankey, obviously Greg Sankey's got a leg up. Obviously, there's a huge advantage there. Obviously, the SEC has a lot more talent, has a lot more culturally speaking. I feel like as a conference, they're always looking to push forward. So to me, I just think Brett Yormark is someone who's done a great job with what he has. I think the Big 12 really suffers from schools not taking winning seriously. And I say that based on their actions, and what they produce on the field, not what they say. So I think, I think he deserved this extension. I think he's going to be crucial in the Super League stuff because I think he really understands private equity in those relationships and how you can leverage those relationships. And, I think the Big 12 moving forward should keep Brett Yormark until there's either a major mistake made or something happens to him. I can't.
Yeah, what scenario would that take?
Like I can't see a scenario right now or a reason or what have you to remove him from his current post. And I think that that's a real testament to who he is because he was brought into a situation that wasn't amazing, frankly. I mean, he has had to deal with everything under the sun with this conference already. So I just think it was well-deserved. I think the timing of it is good. Obviously, you're not announcing this in football season. Like it's a great use of getting some positive PR for the conference. But yeah,
I would agree with that 100%.
I think that I just don't love comparing, commissioners because I feel like it's okay to compare conferences on the field, right? Like, hey, is the Big 12 better than the SEC or whatever question you want to pose as a football conference? But I think when you start comparing commissioners, I think that it's such a difficult thing to do because they just have their circumstances are so different. Their position in the college sports landscape is so different depending on who you're talking to.
What I'll tell you is I don't think it's difficult to compare commissioners at all because there is no comparison. Greg Sankey's the best commissioner in college athletics, and Brett Yormark's the second best commissioner in college athletics. I think what Brett Yormark has done in the short time he's been with this league to get that new TV deal, and then we start looking at all of the things that he's overseen, whether it's international expansion, whether it is bringing new teams and ingratiating those new teams into the Big 12, finding a way, whether it's through Deion Sanders or BYU or to leverage PR opportunities, creating the entertainment and sports experience that the Big 12 basketball tournament is, the Big 12 Pro Day in Dallas. All of these initiatives that Brett Yormark has created, splitting basketball and football into their own commercial divisions. All of those things, in my opinion, make him an elite operator. And that in today's world is what you have to be. I also think you have to be a tremendous politician.
Yeah.
And if we learned anything from the ACC and Jim Phillips didn't have the best relationship with some of the most important stakeholders in his conference. I think Brett Yormark, from everything I've heard, has great relationships across his conference. He takes criticism. He does not mind a voice that speaks out against what his opinion is. Right? To me, that matters. When you can have an open line of communication, I think that's tremendous. I think it's why Brett Yormark is the second best commissioner in all of college sports.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. I think Brett's done a really good job. And, I would have him second just because I think, Jim Phillips is, he's done a solid job. I wouldn't say he's done an amazing job, but a solid job. And in my opinion, Tony Petitti is just cruising along in his conference, following on the coattails of Greg Sankey. So I don't really feel like Tony Petitti's job is all that difficult. All you got to do is keep your ship heading forward, and that's pretty much it. I don't love the way they handled the Michigan thing as a conference.
At all.
I don't love the fact that the conference is riddled with scandals left and right, and it doesn't seem like the conference does anything about it.
Well, I also think that's something that a lot of people don't think about. Conference commissioners are not just overseeing college football and basketball. You look at the money that's being poured into women's sports in this country. You look at all of the issues academically with the way that education money is being doled out in this country currently. You look at the revenue challenges of the House settlement. Conference commissioners have so many responsibilities. You're a salesman. You're a politician. You're a father. You are a boss. You are all of these things to all of these people, and they have to be seamless. And while I agree with you, Tony Petitti, I think, was handed a really impossible situation at Michigan. And I think one of the great conversations that I've had in recent times on probably 2 or 3 occasions. What does Greg Sankey do with the Big Ten if he's the commissioner? Well, my question is, what does Brett Yormark do with the Big Ten if he's the commissioner? I don't know that anybody could have handled it better. My opinion is, based on what I've seen from Greg Sankey, I don't know that he would have done much different with Michigan. I think that is such a shit show, and the violations are so egregious. Tony Petitti had to act, right? When they took action to suspend Jim Harbaugh, he had no choice. Like, Michigan fans saying that there's no evidence, there was nothing anybody could have done about that.
Right.
I also think that Tony Petitti and the other presidents, Kevin Warren, or the other commissioner, Kevin Warren, you leveraged one of the most lucrative financial transactions that has ever happened in college athletics.
Yeah, and I think Kevin Warren's been a better commissioner so far than Tony Petitti has.
Yeah. Well, but why? What has Tony Petitti really had to deal with here?
I think I think he's had scandal after scandal to deal with, and he hasn't really dealt with it.
But he has not. Look at the time frame. And the NCAA and really the FBI, those are the ones handling the Michigan situation. Tony Petitti disciplined Jim Harbaugh. I wish he had disciplined him more. I don't think it was really a suspension.
Isn't that what we're talking about? Like, the job he's done? Like, he didn't do a great job with that situation, in my opinion.
But I don't know that I think we're probably a little premature in declaring that he should have hammered Jim Harbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
There are rule books and bylaws to deal with there. Listen, I think Tony Petitti and Brett Yormark haven't been on the job long enough to really have a historic marker, if you will, on their conferences. But I'm also going to say, I think Brett Yormark's remade the Big 12, got a TV deal done at a time where that TV deal, this new TV deal that we're currently under in the Big 12, that probably saved the ass of the Big 12. Full stop. If you don't expand, and really if you don't get the four corners and BYU and Houston, and if that move doesn't happen, this conference doesn't survive.
Yeah.
If you don't get Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, UCF, this conference doesn't survive. And then on top of that, if you're not savvy enough and pragmatic enough to leverage relationships that you have in the conference to get Arizona State, Utah, Colorado, this conference doesn't survive. Because this conference isn't what it is today without Colorado winning the way they won last year. That was a huge cash grab for this conference. Now, it would have been nice if BYU and Colorado could have closed the deal and gotten into the college football playoff. But, oh, that's right, Arizona State did. Look how much money that made this conference.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the run BYU basketball went on. Look at the run that BYU basketball stayed on recruiting-wise. This conference doesn't exist today without BYU. So I think it's really important. I think Brett Yormark earned this extension, but a hallmark of what his conference has to be going forward, no more Dave Aranda BS at Baylor. No more Mike Gundy's pay cut at Oak State. Raise the bar. Raise the expectation, Brett. That's what I think this conference really needs, because we can't continue to believe the Big 12 can be in the conversation with the Big 10 and the SEC if you're willing to let Dave Aranda keep his job at Baylor. If you're willing to let Mike Gundy cry poor and then get on his knee pads and slobber Oklahoma to come back and play a spring game. How embarrassing are you?
Yeah.
You just can't have that. And I think the interesting part of that conversation is Baylor's president, she's the one that wanted to, hey, have a meeting, let's explore the Super League. Brett Yormark's job is to shepherd this conference into a Super League. Secure the future. Secure the bag. Again and again. Brett Yormark's job. And this is something Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey don't have to worry about, that uniquely Jim Phillips and Brett Yormark do. Every day, your job is to secure the bag. That's your job every day. Make more money. Bring new opportunities every day.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you fall further and further behind.
Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that Brett's done a nice job with that. And I think that it is really important, that you continue to understand that, like right now, Utah Athletics, Mark Harlan released a statement. NCAA has released its annual Division I academic progress report. This is huge financially. 8 Utah sports programs earned perfect scores of 1,000 in a single year report for 23-24 academic year. Do you think academics don't matter? Right? And so I go and I look at this and I say to myself, how important was it that you secured BYU in Utah?
Super
Not
important.
for on the field, in the classroom. Think about that. Think about when you look at Arizona and Arizona State, those are 2 really good universities, academically speaking. Now, you don't want to hand the abacus to Arizona. Might misplace a decimal point. But you can't tell me that when you hear the men's and women's ski team at Utah, women's basketball earned a multi-year rate of 995, covering a time period in which the program earned 3 consecutive NCAA tournament bids and reached the Sweet 16. Women's swimming and diving, like you're talking about excellence in women's sports at the University of Utah. Now, they're not having a year this year, but Utah softball recently went to the College World Series, right? Like you look across the board, they're doing really good things.
Right.
Brett Yormark has to now keep pushing that bar up. Where's Baylor? Where's TCU? Texas Tech has got to win the conference championship right now. Has Joey ever been in a better position to win big at Tech? I don't think he has. I think he is now.
Best spot he's been in.
Right? Like that's Brett Yormark's job. Raise the bar, push the expectations, make more money, shepherd them into a Super League era.
Yeah.
That's his job. All right. Let's get your comments in here. Mike Smith. One could make a great argument that one came into their job with a great stable product. The other came in having just lost 2 top grossing teams with talk of their demise.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I just think it's, I think that Brett's had so much to deal with, in terms of keeping the conference alive.
Well, and I've told you on this show before, I'm done talking about Texas and Oklahoma leaving the Big 12. I think it was emblematic of the situation at the time, and it does not reflect the current status of the Big 12.
No, I just think it's when you look at Yormark's extension and his story so far, that was one of the first major things that he kind of had to
negotiating their early
exit.
Early exit with that exit money, certainly.
Definitely could have been messier, like he did a good job with that.
Mike, I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And then he was able to procure a bag to get Rich Rodriguez back to clean coal country. I mean, who the hell knows, by the way, how many conversations Brett Yormark had behind the scenes with. I said Rich Rodriguez back to West Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Nothing? Jake just glossed over it. Mike, I tried. Jake doesn't have any respect for you. Kim Coulter, Monty, ask yourself this. If Yormark was the SEC or Big Ten commish, would they be better? I think Greg Sankey's done an incredible job. I'm an advocate that I think Greg Sankey has done an incredible job.
I don't think that's a Greg Sankey question.
Not at all.
He's not asking about Greg Sankey.
Tony Petitti, I would agree. I think Mike makes a great point. Tony Petitti walked in and his first job and his first priority was to count how high the $100 bills are stacked in the conference room.
Yeah, like, okay,
right?
Leave all the drama behind, right? Okay, let's do it from a different angle. Okay, yeah. What has Tony Petitti really done for this conference in a positive way? What really has been the big thing that he was in charge of, that he pushed this thing forward? Because I'm sitting here and I'm saying, yeah, you're good. You guys are exactly right. He did walk in and inherit a great situation. And that's why I'm saying, like, I'm not really sitting here like, yeah, wow, Tony Petitti is a way better commissioner than Brett Yormark. Tony Petitti's just sitting here following Greg Sankey along and inherited the great work Kevin Warren did. Like, that's so again, it's no disrespect to
I don't
Tony,
think you're wrong at all.
Like, it's no disrespect to Tony, but it's not, you just haven't, you haven't had to deal with what Brett and Jim Phillips have had to deal with. And again, I also want to say, for Jim Phillips' portion of this, part of that is on Jim Phillips, right? I mean, you have to, as a commissioner, and I think this does not get talked about enough, there is a lot of, like you said, being a politician, but as part of that, like mitigating damage, mitigating public blowback, like working with your member institutions not to have, public conversations in the media about the conference melting down. Like you don't really hear that out of the Big 12. There's none of that drama. We're only talking about, can, Baldy and Waco win more games, or, can
eight ball, please.
Yeah. That's the conversation in Big 12 country. So yeah, I think that I would agree. I think Brett Yormark's the second best commissioner in the country. And I think the question of, if Brett was in Greg Sankey's shoes, I don't think we should really have that conversation, because I think it's one, it's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Two, I just don't think it's a fair thing. Greg deserves a ton of credit, whether you like it or not, for the position that conference is in. Like, he deserves a world of credit for that.
Totes. Nothing wrong with the other commish, but I wouldn't trade for anyone else. No, I don't think you would. Make 2K the ride share way. Okay. Good to see you, dude. You're definitely losing weight. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Seth, who makes hat. SEC, tell a lie often enough, best conference. When the Pac-10 won more bowls last year, losing to Navy and USC, they stated Sankey is remarkable. True winners to hold his line. Love him. I think that Greg Sankey has the total package. And now that they were easily the dominant basketball product.
And they didn't used to be.
I think that development, I think the development of SEC baseball continuing, I think the development of, obviously, football, multiple dynasties, back-to-back dynasties.
Getting the best softball team in the country to come to your conference.
And yeah. And obviously, the expansion of Texas and Oklahoma. It's hard to argue what Greg Sankey's accomplished. I think it's very difficult to argue with it. I think all three of them are really good commissioners. I think Tony Petitti's got a very bright future. Let's see. Who else? Burger University. Okay. Man, I would love a Five Guys burger. I do think I'm going to kidnap my wife and get shrimp fried rice. That's what I want. Tony the Tiger needs to get some of those schools under control. If it's a school getting into some stuff, it's out of the Big Ten. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. Midweek Coug, I agree. That was a fail. Oregon State, Washington State ratings for small town in CW is impressive, but I'm a Beaver fan. I don't think there's any doubt. I maintain to this day, Oregon State is one of the biggest victims in the history of college sports.
Couldn't agree more.
I mean, they just were in the wrong place at the wrong time. And I am a big believer. Your athletic director, your president, your Oregon State did absolutely nothing to be in the position that they're in. I think they were a victim of circumstance. I would agree with that. Totally agree with Monty. Good leader, but Sankey doesn't have it in him to lose and would handle those examples better. I think that's a big question. Oak State James, Gundy made changes to his staff.
Next comment.
What does better this year mean? Somebody define that. If Oklahoma State doesn't win this year, the head coach is out. Well, how about you just win a game? Not hard to go up from not able to go down, right? You're kind of at the bottom of the college football graveyard.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for you to be worse this year than you were last year.
Yeah, I mean, Jay said Yormark basically dismantled the pack, getting deals and teams at the same time.
No. Hold on. No. That's not what he did. Don't put that on Brett Yormark.
No, I would not.
Brett Yormark did not dismantle the Pac-12. Brett Yormark said, hey, I'm standing across the street watching your house burn. Yeah, you guys can come on over.
We have an opportunity.
Yeah. Like, hey, if your house is already burning, yeah, we'll bring in like 100%. We'll improve our conference. But he didn't back channel, Carol Folt at USC to get her to go to the Big Ten. He didn't do that.
Anybody who believes that in this day and age, like we reported exclusively on the show, which now been reported nationally, right? Yormark's had conversations with Duke, North Carolina. Pretty much every major brand in the ACC has gotten a phone call from the Big 12.
As they should.
Why is that a problem? It's not. It's exactly what you should be doing. Utah runs a lean athletic department. Utah also makes more on academics and research than athletics. It's why Utah, Arizona, and ASU stayed together. Well, I also think that Utah's a really good partner to have in your league.
Mm-hmm.
They win at a very high level. I think the expectation under Mark Harlan, I mean, the demand on your coaches is win.
Yeah.
That's the bar. Did you win? Oh, you didn't. Well, we're going to have a conversation about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward,
Yeah, I mean, I and that's how it should be at every university.
And I think when you look around the Big 12, I mean, you need to define what did you say? They run a lean athletic department. Yeah. I mean, we need to asterisk that, because I think running a lean athletic department, that's a different definition for everybody. I mean, again, I can't emphasize this enough. Whether you're talking about Mark Harlan or whatever athletic director or administrator in the Big 12 you want to look at, dude, these people aren't stupid. They understand that, hey, we need money ready to go when the Super League happens. And a lot of that generation, that revenue generation, can happen through secondary sports. And that's why winning is so important.
Winning.
And that's why, and I'm glad that you brought up Mark's tweet about the academics. That's why academics matter so much.
No, they don't, Jake.
I know.
You shut up.
And I know all the people calling all the assholes in the Pac-12 assholes.
You guys remember that? You shut your mouth, Marty.
Academics
don't mean anything.
The Pac-12 homers are more interested in what color the eraser is on their wooden pencil.
I want to win games.
Then, we have that whole dynamic. But I'm just simply saying that you got to look way past, hey, how much money did the football team make? It's how much money did you make on athletics, because I still maintain the best athletic departments in the country are positive, not negative. If you're negative in your athletic department, there's a huge problem. So you got to be positive in athletics, because ultimately most schools that you look at are going to be positive in academics.
But I also think that Greg Sankey talking about recruiting, that if you are a college coach of any sport, you cannot decry the demands of recruiting. You cannot decry the demands of analytics. You have to have the right people. And I struggle with coaches in any sport. I'm not just talking about basketball and football, swimming, shit, I don't care, golf. If you're not out recruiting on a regular basis, trying to replace your very best player, if you have an all-world quarterback and you're not trying to find somebody to push that quarterback and replace them, you're doing it wrong. And I don't care if it's golf. Man, if you're a college basketball team and you are not recruiting Europe, you're doing it wrong. It's what you have to do. And there's so many coaches in this country who don't want to go out and recruit. And Greg Sankey has talked about how, and it might have been at the World Sports Congress, damn it. It was several months ago, and I don't know why we didn't play it, but Greg Sankey talking about maybe that Nick Saban's greatest attribute was he accepted the fact that road trips were not just for football season. And he accepted the fact that hotel rooms weren't just for football season. Because what is football season? 12 months a year. You want to win at a high level? Recruit 12 months a year. You want to win conference championships? Go replace your best player every single year.
Yeah.
Can you say you're doing that at Baylor? Can you say you're doing Dave Aranda's a nice guy. I don't care. Does he win? Well, Monty. No, well, Monty's. You can't have multiple bad seasons in a row in any sport and expect to keep your job. That's just not the culture we live in anymore. And I look at Utah as a great example. They fired the basketball coach in February on the men's side.
I would also, to that point, say, remember how they did that, because I think it plays to exactly what you're saying. They didn't just say, well, some random ass day in February, we're going to fire Buddy. No. You fired him the day that it was set in stone. You weren't going to the tournament, dude.
The moment.
You said, pack your ass. You're out of here, dude.
Goodbye. The moment, right? What did you say, Kim Coulter? Sending 100 right now to the advocates for losing my bet to you. There would be 4 guys crying in the draft.
Hey.
That's amazing. Did you really do that?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I remember that.
That's awesome.
I remember that.
I appreciate you. I guess I just look at it differently. I think that we have to find a way to raise bars in this conference. Ryan Dooley and Gloria, we trust, as you should. Listen, if you're in the Pac-12 or if you're in the Mountain West, you're going to find out what your commissioner is. And Teresa Gould secured a distribution deal for the year. It's a win. How is it not a win that you're on ESPN and CBS? Now you're really on the CW. It's a win. Now she's got to get a deal for 2026 and beyond. If you're Gloria Navarez, you have to secure membership. And you secure membership by bringing in more revenue, including a new media rights deal.
Yeah.
And now, really, both of them are focused on running their faces into each other in mediation. I don't love it. I don't love it.
Yeah.
I just think it is what it is. Oak State James. Let's look at facts. Oh, God. Monty said on this very show that Oak State's best position last year was their linebackers. I said safeties, I believe. He said if both Oliver and Martin got hurt last year, that cost them at least 3 games. I believe your best position on defense was safety. Oh, that's, how I know that? Because he now plays at Oklahoma. Here's the problem. And James, you can just keep dying on this cross, my guy. Mike Gundy's not a good football coach anymore. Mike Gundy didn't have enough talent on the roster last year. Mike Gundy didn't have a quarterback on his roster last year. Mike Gundy could not block for a guy that should have been the best running back in the country last year. You didn't have an O-line. You didn't have, the best wide receivers in the country, Monty. Turns out that was a lie.
Not even close.
That was a lie. The lie detector determined that was a lie. That's why you're a TCU fan now. Because you're not relevant.
And that's the part, if because you're being a red ass here, with all due respect.
You really are.
And this is the thing that I haven't said yet about the whole TCU fandom thing. Bro, you being a TCU fan has nothing to do with you, going to school there in the fall.
No.
You're a TCU fan because Oklahoma State sucks right now. They're a bad team. And Mike Gundy and his career is sunsetting. and the school doesn't want to move on from him. God forbid they'd have to look for a new head coach that's younger and more in tune with the current climate. So your defense to that is going to be, oh, well, look what he did in the portal. Look what he did, to add to the offseason. Look at all the changes on the staff. We've been down this road 100 freaking times, dude. And no matter how many different ways you want to spin it, does anyone believe that Oklahoma State's going to come out here and compete for this conference championship this year? Because I don't.
How on earth was Ollie Gordon the second?
Yeah, the great drinker.
179th pick in the draft. Because Mike Gundy is a has-been who I'm not really sure ever was.
You understand that Ollie Gordon's got, and maybe not the same, but, similar talent to what Ashton Jeanty shows people. You understand that he's bigger than Jeanty. Like he can run through people. He can make people miss. Like you're an all-world back and you can't block for the dude.
It is quite literally, it's embarrassing to be an Oklahoma State fan right now. And I totally understand that. You cut your coach's pay. You said you were going to spend a bunch of money in NIL and you didn't. And then you want to tout old farts being your coordinators and a quarterback who's never proven anything. It's a tough existence.
Portal additions.
It's a tough existence right now in a conference that's going to be notably better, because the bottom half of this conference, say what you want about your mom's house, but the bottom half of this conference got exponentially better than Oak State. And if you had done, again, what did Utah do? What did Utah do? Did Utah hire some, we need a new offensive coordinator. And, Jake, can you find me some crusty ass has-beens who never were? Get me a list of those guys. Let's why don't we do this? Why don't we go find some guys who run archaic systems? Why don't we do that?
Because it's all part of the plan.
Or, I know we need an offensive coordinator because we just got humiliated.
Yeah, I think.
And our quarterback was 78 years old. And then the backup quarterback, who was 13 and has a mommy complex. We're going to have to, can we do anything about that? Well, why don't we go get the offensive coordinator who oversaw one of the greatest offenses in the history of his conference? And why don't we bring his quarterback with him, who was one of the most prolific passing quarterbacks in the country last year? And furthermore, why don't we make sure that that offensive coordinator has a long, successful track record recruiting in Utah, Nevada, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, the entire West Coast. Yeah, that's Jason Beck, because that's what the flip Utah did.
Yeah, I feel like the biggest difference between what Utah has done and what Oklahoma State hasn't done is Utah took it personally. Utah took all the struggle, all the loss, all the failure. They took it personally.
And they hired do you guys understand? They hired a guy in Jason Beck who played quarterback at BYU, their rival, right? Before that, you have to remember that he worked for Bronco Mendenhall, who arguably is one of the great coaches in the history of football in the state of Utah. He's got all the high school relationships, and he's shown you that, he can absolutely take a quarterback, develop him into a pro prospect, because he's done it multiple times. What has Mike Gundy done? Did Mike Gundy go hire that guy? No, he didn't. And I'm telling you now, BYU is going to be better this year than they were last year.
Yes.
Utah will be better this year than last year. I'm done pronouncing Utah the best team in the conference, but such as in like. I would assume Kansas is going to be better this year than last year. And I still maintain if we're crowning people's ass before the season even starts, I'm going to crown Texas Tech. Because if that roster loses more than a game, you should hang Joey by a yard arm.